Welcome back. We're getting an update on what's happening in the Russia-Ukraine war. And joining me is somebody who's a Canadian journalist and is on the ground right there, Adam Zivo. Adam, again, thanks so much for joining us. Um, you provide a lot of context as to what's been happening and really giving a more of a humanitarian feel to the situation. So we knew at the onset of the war, there was a lot of shelling in Kyiv. We know of Kharkiv. There were a lot of areas that were really shelled heavily. Are those still hotspots? Where are the current hotspots in Ukraine?
Well, it changes week by week. I mean, anywhere in the south and east is obviously going to be dealing with a lot of violence and a lot of shelling. So if you're looking around Bakhmut, which was taken by the Russians, that's still an area of contention. Then you have all along the southern fronts. Odessa, which is the city that I'm in, was bombed quite heavily last month, which was not easy. Currently, the Russians are sending a lot of drones to Ukrainian ports on the Danube River on the Romanian border to stop grain exports there. So it really changes. But I think, one thing I need to stress is that there is in a sense like two Ukraines right now. So you have Ukraine as it exists by the front lines, and their life is very difficult and everything is destroyed, and a missile could land in your market square at any time. And then you have the rest of Ukraine, where it's more comparable to Israel during a particularly hot period, where you have to worry about missiles coming in every once in a while. But life does go on with a certain degree of relative normalcy.
Hmm. Yeah, that's important, I think, to explain that. So, I mean, it sounds like the civilians in the rest of Ukraine are sort of handling things, managing well. The ones on the front line, are people simply evacuating still? Will there be any Ukrainians left by the end of this war in those hotspot regions?
A lot of people have been evacuated, but there is a certain segment of the population which stays, and it usually stays for a variety of reasons, but most of them are related to poverty and age. So you have a lot of old people who have lived in their village or in their city for their entire lives, and they just don't want to leave because they don't know what's out there. They were born in this place, they just accept that they might die in this place. They would rather die in their village than go to another place. There are also a large number of Ukrainians who just don't have the funds to survive anywhere else. And so they'd rather stay in their village than risk living in total poverty elsewhere.
Wow. And what is, I mean, I hate talking about this, but how high are the casualties now? How many thousands? I've seen figures, a few hundred thousands have died on the Russian side, also on the Ukraine side. What are your figures? What are you hearing?
From my understanding, there's about a 500,000 casualties so far, but it needs to be understood that not all of every casualty is a death. So, from my understanding, there's about 70,000 Ukrainians dead and about 100,000 to 120,000 injured Ukrainians. And then there's about 50% more Russians who are dead or injured. So, about 300,000 Russian casualties and 200,000 Ukrainian casualties.
My goodness. And when you have casualties like that in a war, you just feel it for honestly for a few generations to come. It really impacts people. So those who have fled, because again, we started the war, there was a lot of shelling in Kiev, the capital. Have people now returned? Are people returning back to their homes? Probably not the south and the east, but in the rest of Ukraine when they've left, are we now hearing stories that they're actually returning, or are they settling in other Western nations?
Oh, a significant portion of the people who left have returned, partially because, let's say, for example, Kyiv, which was besieged on three sides at the beginning of the war and was completely empty, is now somewhat back to normal. I mean, of course, there's missiles and drones that come in all the time, but you can still sustain an economy there, and people love their country and they love their cities and they want to come back. In small villages along the east and south, there's nothing to come back to because everything is destroyed. So those people are not coming back home. In Kharkiv, Kharkivers are known for being kind of crazy. So they want to return home as quickly as possible, even though they're being bombed pretty much every single week. And they don't even flinch at that stuff anymore. They hear an explosion, they're like, oh, okay, I'm going to walk my dog.
Wow. So they sound
So they
very
have that kind of.
hardened by war. They're maybe even more patriotic. I don't know.
Well, it's crazy what you can get used to, right? I mean, for example, me being in Odessa, at this point, I've had situations where I hear an explosion and I just like, okay, go on with my day. I was walking back from the gym once. I looked up, I saw a missile flying through the sky, and I just continued walking back, and no one around me seemed particularly miffed because you can't it's not good for your mental health to be crying every single day for a year. People
Mhm.
find a way to persevere and to move on as best as they can.
Wow. Lots to unpack here. We only have one more segment left, but after this commercial break, we're going to talk about where does the war go, who is winning, and how will it end. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Mhm.